Some stories don't start with swords or monsters. They start with something small, an apple, a simple apple, and how one careless moment turned into a tragedy. I'm Al-Hakawati, the legendary storyteller, and tonight's tale reminds us how tiny choices can echo louder than we ever expect. So settle in, and if you enjoy stories like these, stay with me and subscribe. There are many more waiting by the fire. One night long ago, the Caliph Harun al-Rashid felt the urge to leave his palace. He wanted to see the city not as a ruler, but as a man, to know how his people were truly living. So he called for his vizier, Ja'far, and told him to walk through Baghdad in secret, dressed like ordinary men, not to be praised, not to be feared, just to listen, to hear what people really said about those in power, and to see with his own eyes who was treated fairly and who was not. Ja'far agreed at once. That night, the Caliph, Ja'far, and Masrur slipped out of the palace and walked through Baghdad. The city was quiet, the streets nearly empty, as if everyone had finally gone to sleep. As they passed through a narrow lane, they noticed an old man coming toward them. He moved slowly, leaning on a stick, with a fishing net and a basket balanced on his head. Just the way he walked told you life had not been kind to him. He was muttering to himself about hunger and hardship. The Caliph stopped and listened. He didn't need to catch every word. He already understood enough. The Caliph stepped closer and asked him what he did for a living. The old man said he was a fisherman. He had left home earlier that day, hoping to catch something for his family. But so far, he had nothing. He sounded tired and hopeless, like he was ready to give up. The Caliph felt for him and made an offer. He told the fisherman to come with them to the river, cast his net one more time, and trust his luck. Whatever he caught, the Caliph promised to buy it for 100 dinars. The old man could hardly believe it. Grateful and excited, he followed them to the Tigris, and there, under the night sky, he threw his net into the dark water and waited. When he finally pulled it in, the net was heavy, much heavier than he expected. It wasn't fish at all. It was a big, locked chest. The Caliph checked it over, then gave the fisherman the 100 dinars he promised. The old man thanked them and disappeared into the night. The Caliph had the chest carried back to the palace. Ja'far and Masrur stepped forward and opened it. Inside was a bundle, wrapped tight. They opened it and found a carpet. Underneath lay a young woman, lifeless, hidden away as if no one was meant to see her. The sight shook the Caliph. Tears filled his eyes. This wasn't just a crime. It was a human life thrown away, treated like it meant nothing. He turned to Ja'far, angry and deeply shaken. This should never happen under his rule. He said, "How am I supposed to answer for this before God?" His anger wasn't just rage. It was fear, shame, and the weight of responsibility all at once. He swore the murderer would be found and punished. Then, in his fury, he warned Ja'far. If he failed to bring the killer, he would pay the price himself. Ja'far went pale and shaken and begged for 3 days. The Caliph agreed. Ja'far left the palace with his thoughts in chaos. How could he find a murderer when there were no witnesses, no clues, no trail to follow? Accuse the wrong person and an innocent life would be lost. Fail to find the killer and he would be dead himself. For 3 days, he stayed at home, trapped between fear and helplessness. On the 4th day, the summons arrived. Ja'far stood before the Caliph once more. When he asked where the murderer was, he spoke the truth. He didn't know. That answer sealed his fate. The Caliph ordered his execution. The news spread through Baghdad like wildfire. A public hanging was announced. Ja'far the vizier to be executed at the palace gate. People came out from every part of the city, curious and confused. They didn't know what crime had been committed, only that something terrible must have happened for such a powerful man to fall so suddenly. Ja'far was brought out, standing there for everyone to see. All of Baghdad waited, holding its breath, just as the executioner was ready and the crowd began to cry for Ja'far. A young man suddenly pushed his way forward. He calmly declared that he was the one who had killed the girl, and that he should be punished in Ja'far's place. Ja'far felt two things at once: relief that his life was spared, and fear for the young man standing there so openly. Then, before anyone could react, An old man stepped forward and claimed the crime for himself. Now there were two men, both insisting they were guilty, and no one yet understood why. Jafar didn't know what to do, so he brought both men to the Caliph. After hearing the young man's story, the Caliph could tell he was telling the truth. The young man explained that the girl was his wife and cousin, and the old man was her father. A terrible misunderstanding had led to a horrible mistake. His wife had fallen ill, and he wanted to take her to the baths to help her feel better. But she stopped him and said there was one thing she really wanted first, an apple. She wanted to smell it and take a bite. He searched the city for an apple, checking every place he could think of, but couldn't find one. When he got home empty-handed, she only grew weaker. He spent the night worrying about how to get the fruit. The next morning, he searched every orchard, but still found nothing. Then an old gardener told him the only apples left were in the commander's orchard all the way in Basra, guarded carefully by the gardener. Without thinking twice, he set off for Basra. It took him 15 days to get there and back, and he bought 3 apples, 1 dinar each. When he gave them to his wife, she was still too sick to enjoy them, and it took another 10 days before she finally started to get better. Later, while he was at his shop, a slave passed by, holding one of the apples and tossing it in his hand. When the man asked where it came from, the slave laughed and said he had taken it from his mistress, a woman whose husband had gone all the way to Basra just to bring her apples. When the man heard what the slave had said, something inside him broke. He closed his shop at once and went home, his thoughts racing, his anger growing with every step. At home, he looked at the apples. There were only 2. He asked his wife about the third one. She said she didn't know where it had gone. That was all he needed to hear. In his mind, the slave's word became truth. Doubt turned into certainty, and certainty into rage. And in that moment, he made the worst mistake of his life. Later that same night, he tried to hide what he had done. He wrapped her body, locked it inside a chest, and threw it into the river, convinced the truth would sink with it. But fate was not finished with him. When he returned home, he found his eldest son crying. The boy hadn't seen his mother and didn't know what had happened. When his father asked why he was crying, the child told him everything. He said he had taken one of his mother's apples and gone outside to play. While he was there, a servant passed by, took the apple from his hand, and asked where it came from. The boy begged him to listen. He said his father had gone all the way to Basra to bring those apples for his sick mother, but the servant didn't listen. He simply walked away with it. The boy was terrified that his mother would be upset or fall ill again if she found out, so he stayed away until evening, hiding from her. In that moment, the truth struck him hard. The apple had never come from his wife. The slave had lied, and his wife had died for nothing. He collapsed in grief. Not long after, her father arrived. When he heard what had happened, he sat beside him, and the two of them wept together. They mourned for days, filled with regret over a loss that could never be undone. When the Caliph heard everything, he was stunned. He declared that no innocent person would be punished, and that the lie of the slave was what had set this tragedy in motion. The Caliph was still angry, but his judgment was clear. The young man had acted out of terrible mistake, not cruelty. The one who truly caused the disaster was the slave who had lied. He then turned to Jafar and ordered him to find that slave. If he failed, Jafar would take the punishment in his place. Well, once again, fate chose Jafar. He went home shaken and full of worry. For 3 days he stayed inside, convinced his time was running out. He could only hope that the same God who had saved him before would do so again. On the 4th day, he gathered the judges and said his goodbyes. Then he went to his youngest daughter, held her close, and kissed her farewell. As he did, he felt something round in her pocket and asked her what it was. She told him it was an apple. The household servant had brought it a few days earlier, but only after she paid him 2 dinars. The moment Jafar heard this, everything clicked. He took the apple from her pocket, looked at it, and felt a wave of relief wash over him. At last, the truth was within reach. He immediately ordered that the servant be brought before him. Jafar asked the servant where the apple had come from. The servant explained that he hadn't taken it from the palace or the Caliph's orchard. The servant admitted he had taken the apple from a child in the street, the same child who had begged him, saying it was for his sick mother, and that his father had traveled to Basra to get it. He ignored the boy, kept the apple, and later sold it for 2 dinars to Jafar's daughter. When Jafar heard this, he was stunned. All the suffering, all the chaos, and the death of an innocent woman had come from this single act. He felt relieved that his own life had been spared, but also deep regret, knowing the disaster had been caused by someone in his own household. Jafar grabbed the servant by the hand and led him to the Caliph. He told the whole story, how the apple was taken, how the mistake grew, and how an innocent woman had died because of it. The Caliph listened in shock. Then he laughed so hard he could hardly stand. He said the story was unbelievable and that everyone should hear it. Jafar said there was an even stranger story than this one. He told the Caliph about the vizier Nur ad-Din of Egypt and his brother Shams ad-Din, saying this tale was nothing compared to theirs. The Caliph wanted to hear it immediately. Jafar agreed, but only if the Caliph promised to spare his servant's life. The Caliph said he would listen, and if the story truly was more astonishing, the servant would live. If not, his fate was sealed. And so you see, just a small act, taking an apple, ended up causing the death of an innocent life. It shows how even tiny choices can have huge consequences. Next time on Al-Hakawati, we will begin the story of the two brothers, Nur ad-Din and Shams ad-Din. This is the tale the vizier was about to share with the Caliph, full of clever tricks, surprises, and twists you won't see coming. But before we go, I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were in this story? Think about it and let your mind wander through the choices we make every day.